Welcome to Salem Witch Trials Daily. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
This is Sarah Jack. On March 7th, 1692, Reverend Increase Mather and new governor, Sir William Phips, left London for the slow journey home to Boston.
Mather, one of New England's most trusted and preeminent Puritan divines, had spent years in London negotiating a new colonial charter.
The original Massachusetts charter had been revoked in 1684, leaving the colony under an interim government.
While in London, Mather used his considerable influence to secure the appointment of Sir William Phips, a Maine-born treasure hunter and military man with little political background and a terrible track record as a military man also, as the first royal governor of the newly established province of Massachusetts Bay.
Because Phips and Mather were away on their return journey, the early months of the Salem witch hunt unfolded under this interim colonial government that lacked an official charter or legally established high courts to try capital crimes.
When Phips and Mather finally do arrive in mid-May 1692, they bring the new 1691 charter, which effectively mandated religious tolerance for all Protestants.
By the time Governor Phips stepped off the boat in Boston, Massachusetts jails were overflowing with accused witches.
Unsure of how to handle the unprecedented crisis, Phips hastily established the Special Court of Oyer and Terminer, which means to hear and determine, to process the massive backlog of prisoners.
In Cambridge, Massachusetts, on March 7, 1692, local ministers held a meeting to discuss a subject that weighed heavily on them.
At the time of the outbreak of the witch trials, Puritan ministers were deeply anxious about a perceived decline in the colony's moral values and religiosity.
They operated under a worldview that the English settlers had built their city upon a hill in what was previously the devil's territory, and they did believe Satan was now orchestrating a vast diabolical conspiracy to pull down Christ's church and replace it with his own dark kingdom.
Because of the perceived generational drift from piety, ministers feared that God was angry and was casting judgment on the province, allowing Satan to afflict the colonists as a punishment for their sins. In order to stop provoking God, they sought a moral reformation.
This intense apocalyptical dread primed both the clergy and the public to interpret the strange behavior of the afflicted girls not as natural illness, but as a literal demonic invasion.
Also on March 7, 1692, following the intense first round of preliminary examinations in Salem Village, magistrates John Hathorne and Jonathan Corwin ordered Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne to be transferred to jail in Boston.
This was standard procedure at the time, as suspects in capital cases were generally held in Boston to await trial before the colony's highest court, which wasn't available.
The conditions in the 17th century Boston prison were horrific. It was dark, freezing in the winter, festering with vermin, and the transfer had devastating consequences.
Sarah Good was sent to the prison accompanied by her infant daughter, who had just been born a few months prior in December of 1691.
Though the Boston jail keeper purchased blankets for the baby, she tragically died in the foul prison conditions before June.
The prisoners were later joined by Sarah Good's 4-year-old daughter, Dorothy Good, who was transferred to the Boston jail on April 12th.
Dorothy was fitted with tiny, specially made shackles for her wrists and ankles to prevent her specter from roaming.
Of the 3 women brought to the Boston jail on March 7th, only Tituba would survive the Salem witch trials, though she would languish in jail until May 1693.
Sarah Good would face the newly formed Court of Oyer and Terminer and be hanged for a crime she did not commit, while Dorothy would rely on caretakers the rest of her life.
Sarah Osborne, whose health was already failing before her arrest, would go on to perish in the Boston prison on May 10th, 1692.